Hello and welcome to Creator Weekly Live for June 2nd, 2024. I'm Peggy Kay, and today I have updates for YouTube, for TikTok. I'm going to talk about labeling of AI generated images and maybe a little bit about what's happening with Google search. I'm going to get started. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you let me know what you think of this week's updates, and I hope you're all having a great Sunday. So, here is the first thing I wanted to talk about. It's fun. Let me get this up. Playables are now on YouTube. These are fun little games. They are not like shooters or anything. You can access them now either on desktop or mobile, and there's a new Playables page that you can navigate to. I am actually Words of Wonders is my game. Jolyn says I'm enjoying some of the Playables. There's some fun little games there. I truly don't understand exactly why YouTube is doing this, because when I'm sucked into one of these games, I'm not watching videos, but it's probably to keep people on the platform. So that's kind of a fun update for today. Now I'll get into the more nitty-gritty. If you are a YouTube partner, there is an update if you get your earnings in something other than US dollars. Last November, YouTube launched the option to see your AdSense payments information in the YouTube Studio app. That was limited to people who used US dollars. Now it shows other currencies as well. The big limitation of this is that you'll only see this information if you have one YouTube channel connected to your AdSense account. This, I believe, is probably a limitation of AdSense, because if you have multiple YouTube channels that are monetized, AdSense basically pools all that money together. So they probably have to sort out how that will work exactly. Andrew says, with all the updates PEs need to keep track of, who has time to play games? I have time to play games. I think one of the good things is that these are not games where you necessarily have to complete a quest or something like that. You can pick them up, you can put them down. It's almost like fidgeting a little. But if you get too distracted by games, maybe this is not for you. All right. So those were the updates for YouTube. I also wanted to mention that there is a nice interview with the YouTube CEO, Neal Mohan. This was done by Bloomberg. And really, there are two interesting quotes I wanted to mention. First of all, he says that YouTube's really kind of its own sort of unique thing. They're not a social media platform. They're not traditional media, in the sense that they're not linear television. They're really sort of their own thing. And I think that's maybe something important to think about, where there are a lot of comparisons to YouTube to other platforms that have more social features, and it's not that. The other quote that I thought was good is that he says, our business, YouTube's business, is successful. YouTube's business is successful when our creators' business is successful. And so we are really pleased with the size of the creator economy. I think that that is something that really sets YouTube apart from a lot of other platforms. A lot of other platforms talk about do things they do for creators, but YouTube really puts their puts their money where their mouth is, sort of, and monetization on YouTube is pretty easy and it does pretty well. So I think it's really a unique thing. So I recommend checking out that interview if you're interested in hearing about what the CAO is saying about where YouTube is going. So the other video news I wanted to talk about today, really briefly, is an update on TikTok. This update on TikTok is the launch of TikTok Studio. This is what they call a new comprehensive creation and management platform equipped with tools creators can use to create, edit, upload, manage, and analyze their TikTok account and content performance. So that's a mouthful. Basically, I will show you my TikTok Studio, which is not particularly exciting because I don't post anything to TikTok. But you can see that it has the option to make posts, upload videos. It should have basic video editing as well. You can manage your comments, see your analytics, and it links to their Creator Academy. So this seems like a nice update if you're a TikTok creator, and I think it's interesting that it took them a while to get these sort of creator tools. Now, this is on desktop. They have a mobile app that's in beta, I believe, for Android devices in the Google Play Store. They say there's going to be an iOS app coming soon. So if you post videos to TikTok, you should check this out. And Andrew says, YouTube is different, that's for sure. And I agree, it's its own thing. Yeah, I think yeah, that's sort of obvious and true, but it kind of makes it harder to talk about what's happening on YouTube compared to other platforms because it's not really comparable. So I am going to switch gears to the topic that is really something I've been thinking about a lot. And if you follow my blog, I actually wrote about this. One of the things that Instagram is doing is automatically labeling images that have been created or edited with AI tools. And this is something that they are doing automatically because Adobe and other big AI platforms are adding metadata to the generated images. And this has caused some controversy. So I'm going to share this post on Threads. So this is really what kicked off the discussion in my mind. Someone on Threads who's in the photography community said that they posted a shot from Mesa Arch and posted it on Threads, and it had the made with AI label automatically added to it. The photographer was a bit upset and because it was not made with AI, it's a real photograph, but it was edited in Photoshop, as many, many photos are. In Photoshop, they used one of Photoshop's generative AI tools to fix a little lens flare. That was enough when they exported the photo to get this label. Now, I did a bit of an experiment myself to see how this labeling works. And this is something I did. I took a picture of myself and I opened it in Adobe Express and I used their generative fill tool to fix the image in the corner. You can kind of see I point to the part that I changed. When I do this, and then oh, so this is a closer up. That's what I changed with the AI tool. Everything else is completely the same. And then I ran it through the content credentials. Now, contentcredentials.org/verify lets you upload an image and see what metadata has been attached about whether it's AI generated or not. And the important thing to note is that it does come up as AI generated, even though all I changed was that tiny little bit in the corner. So this kind of thing has sparked a lot of discussion. A lot of it is sort of philosophical, because at what point is an image AI generated? Definitely, if you go into Firefly or Gemini or ChatGPT or any of these platforms and say, generate an image of something that is fully AI generated, of course, that should have a label. But what about small edits? I could have made this edit in Adobe Express or Photoshop or another image editing platform without using any sort of generative AI tools. So why should this particular edit have an automatic label when other edits using non-AI tools aren't labeled? It seems like it's really not a useful label at all. And, someone pointed out that um, if everything is labeled, the labels don't mean anything. Kind of hard to see on the screen here. Whoops. There. Uh, but basically, they made a very small edit in their image using the generative AI tool, exported it. It gets an automatic label on Threads and Instagram. But if they just use standard Photoshop techniques to edit in a big monster, that doesn't get any label at all, because these labels are automatic and based on the metadata. So to my mind, this is really not a useful solution, because people have shown also you can do AI editing, and then if you copy paste that image, or if you take a screenshot and share the screenshot, it's not automatically labeled. So relying on the metadata to label things and then labeling completely fabricated images the same way you label an image that just has a small edit is not useful. Andrew says, to my mind, any edit that changes whatever a camera captures is an image and not a photo. And okay, so there's a problem with that, Andrew, and everyone out there, because if you take a photo with a modern camera with your phone, they're doing all kinds of processing as you take the photo. And, we know from Google on Android phones and probably also on Apple phones, there are AI tools in the camera itself that are making changes. So what distinctions do you make? At the same time, almost every image you see, talking about traditional photos that are processed in the darkroom, those had modifications made as well. Some of them are small changes. You can change the color balance, you can brightness, contrast, even composition. You can change those things in a traditional darkroom. So I think that there is not a clear, bright dividing line about what should be labeled and what shouldn't be labeled. All I know is that the current label is not that useful because it's putting AI generated on things that are 99.9% the original photo, and it has an inconsequential edit, whereas things that are completely fabricated but don't have this metadata aren't labeled at all. So this is not the way to go. It is really going to be interesting to see what happens when YouTube starts automatically labeling. They do ask people to put their own label on, but it's not like if you ever used a tool that has AI in it, you need to do this. There really isn't a clear, bright dividing line between AI generated and not. And the reality is, if you look at the top posts on Facebook, obviously fake generated images. People love them. And so what are we doing here? If it's trying to make sure people aren't misled, and truly, no one cares if you have a landscape photo and you've removed the lens flare or something like that. That's not a big deal. It's not going to change what the photo means. It doesn't even change the way it looked, because what your eyes see is not the same as what the camera sees. So how are they going to actually use this to fight misinformation? I don't know. I feel like Meta, and probably other platforms too, love these automatic labels based on the metadata, because it means they don't actually have to think about anything, right? They don't have to make any decisions about whether this is a real photo or not. All they say is, we're showing what the metadata shows. There's no judgment calls there, which is exactly what they want. This is not going to help. So we'll see what Instagram and these other platforms do if they make changes. How are they going to manage this? Or is it going to be that photographers just don't use the generative AI tools for photos that they share on these platforms? Because again, you can use all the other tools in Photoshop to make changes, and none of that is labeled. Something that needs to be figured out. I want to say hi to Tanya, who is here from London. And it's good to have you all in the discussion. Andrew says there needs to be a line, but who decides what it should be? Well, that's the big question, right? I think, to my mind, the label should apply if it meaningfully changes the image or the video. But what does that mean? I mean, that's just another thing. And that means humans have to be deciding, is this something that needs labeling or not? The people who want to mislead others are the ones who are not going to be self-labeling their images. So the bad guys, the people who want to use this to spread propaganda or false information, are the very ones who aren't going to follow the rules. And they will probably, use screenshots and share their screenshots and so forth. So I don't know what the solution is, but it's not a solution. Chef says the verified process using locations drives me cuckoo. Hopefully not permanently. And Craig says, how would you know what is AI and what is not? Well, yeah, that's the big question, right? As generative AI tools get better, it's going to be harder and harder to distinguish that. And truly, someone who is good at doing Photoshop can make misleading images without any AI tools to start with? So it's a good question. I don't think anyone has the answer right now. All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about Google search. You probably all use Google search. I use Google search. Um, the first thing I wanted to talk about, just really briefly, last week we talked about all the problems with AI overviews in Google search, where Google was showing really nonsensical answers, completely wrong answers, bad information. Now, Google has responded to this. They say they are improving the system. They're saying they're building better detection mechanisms for nonsensical queries. So if they think the query is nonsensical, they may not show an AI overview. They say they are limiting the inclusion of satire and humor content. Well, duh, they should have been doing this from the first place. But that means there's less likely to be an answer provided by The Onion. They say they updated their systems to limit the use of user-generated content in responses that could offer misleading advice. That seems, again, really wise. People look at Reddit and Quora and these other platforms for advice. A lot of that advice is terrible. Some of the advice is just trolling. Google should not be surfacing that in some sort of definitive answer for a query. They said they've added triggering restrictions for queries where AI overviews were not proving to be as helpful. I don't know what that means or how they are determining that. That's a big black box. And then finally, they said that they already had it set to not show AI overviews for things like hard news topics, where factuality is important. And they say in the case of health, they launched additional triggering refinements to enhance our quality protections. I feel like those are some fancy words to say that they're still struggling with this. The problem I have with what Google's saying is that in this article, in the keyword, their official blog, they also talk about how these were not common queries, that people were getting these odd responses to. And they are saying that a tiny fraction, like 1 out of many millions of the responses, violate their content terms. That's not what people are worried about. So I feel like Google is kind of dancing around the problem that these AI summaries of the search results are frequently going to have wrong information. Even if, as they say, this is not traditional generative AI where it might hallucinate, it's still taking information from various web pages, kind of mashing it together. And because the AI doesn't really understand the web pages, things are taken out of context. And sometimes it misunderstands the phrasing. And of course, a lot of information online is just not correct. And they are surfacing that. And what they're not acknowledging is that when they generate one of these summaries, the way it's written, it sounds very authoritative. And a lot of people are never going to get past that to say, you know, to investigate whether the information is correct or, you know, if the source is a reliable source. So I think the AI summaries are still kind of terrible, because even if they're wrong, only like 10% of the time, you need to know when that 10% is. And I think that's the hard thing. The AI overviews are okay if it's something that you already have expertise in, that you already know about, so you can see where the information is wrong. if it's something you don't actually have expertise on, which is usually what people ask about, you're not going to spot those tiny little bits of information that are incorrect. So I'm still thumbs down on AI overuse. So the other big, big thing that search engine optimizers, SEOs, are talking about this week. Rand Fishkin at SparkToro made this big post. It says, an anonymous source shared thousands of leaked Google search API documents with me. Everyone in SEO should see them. I mean, that sounds pretty amazing, right? Now, I've read these articles, and to my eyes, a lot of this seems a little bit overblown because this sounds like some insider leaked this information. Okay, it turns out Google accidentally published this to a GitHub repository. Some of it may have been there for months. So this isn't some anonymous insider who wants to share this with the world. Instead, someone discovered it, that it had been improperly been made public. This is API documentation from inside Google's search division. So what it is describing all the various terms and calls in the API. It doesn't actually say that Google's currently using any of this. It doesn't have any context around it. It's not even clear that any of this or what part of this is used for search ranking. So there have been a lot of sort of breathless articles and discussion. Oh, has Google been lying to us all this time? I don't think that that's true. It is true that Google very carefully words its updates. SEOs love to try and parse out what the meaning is, but I think a lot of times it just means what it means. And there's not a lot of underlying, they're not really hiding anything, but they're not actually sharing that much information either. So if you try and parse things out, you can be easily misled. It's also frustrating. Understandably, they want to know how Google search works. Google doesn't want to share all the details of how it works, in part to prevent bad SEOs from gaming the system. Google did respond to this. So they said the leaked documents are real. These are real documents. So there was one concern that this might not be real information. But as Barry Schwartz reports, Google won't comment on the specific elements in the document in order to keep its ranking system safe and secure. Google's argument is you should not look at this documents, and it's thousands of pages worth of documents. There's still people out there parsing through it, and there's probably going to be tons of blog posts about what it all means. The problem is there is no context for it, and so it goes from describing this information to making a lot of speculative claims about how Google is using it, and that's what they don't actually know. The bottom line is Google is not going to share any of those details. Google also said that search ranking signals are constantly changing, but specific and individual signals that go into Google rankings change. And so, again, Google's not going to say whether any of the specific elements in these documents are currently in use, if they're accurate, if they're invalid, if they're used in search, how weighted they are in search. So that's where it stands right now. I think you're going to see a lot of people speculating a lot about what these documents mean. And it's not clear any of that's going to be true. It's tough. People who want to rank websites in Google search, they want to know exactly how it works, and Google isn't sharing that information. Chef says, we need AI filters. Come on, Google. Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential for AI tools to be really helpful, summarize documents, all these things, but there are limitations, and I'm not sure when they're going to get over those limitations. It's just a little frustrating that Google has released these, and really other platforms release these things before they are that accurate. And it seems like speed over accuracy. So those are my updates for today. I just wanted to take 1 second. As some of you know, I'm pretty active on Threads. Um, they have a new web interface that's really, really nice. So if you use Threads and you go to threads.net on desktop, you can now pin the columns. It's sort of like the old TweetDeck. You can pin columns. So I have a column that's my following feed, my For You feed. There's a search column. I also bookmark posts, and I have a column for that. So you can have everything right at your fingertips. I think it's a nice update, and I feel like Threads, it's meta, so there are issues there, but I think they really are trying to make this a viable platform, while Twitter X is trying to go all in on video. There's some amusing stories there because it's X. If you do a search for X video, you do not come up with what was formerly known as Twitter. Do that search on your own. They should have thought about branding. All right, so those are the updates for this week. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you join me next week as well. Have a fantastic week. And whoops. Of course, I covered up the button.